Welcome to the first episode of CrossFitters on couches drinking coffee.
Cheers.
I am in Maplewood, New Jersey at Coach Panda, Keith Wittenstein's house. Thanks for letting me stay the last couple of nights.
You're welcome.
I'm a little sleep deprived due to baby Jet. But
Baby Jet is napping right now.
he is napping. He's a great kid. And Keith and I were just sitting here doing work, and I said, let's record something. So Keith was at the seminar last night at CrossFit Paradise. I've done 4 this week across Connecticut and New Jersey. And having had Keith there and then discussing a little bit about flexible eating and how it relates to the whole dieting world afterwards last night, I thought it'd be really interesting to hear from someone else's perspective, especially someone who's very educated in the subject and also has years of experience with himself and hundreds of athletes. Keith has owned a box and he's coached at numerous CrossFits and tens of thousands of CrossFitters over the years on your level 1. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So you've influenced a lot of people, and importantly, Keith and I have discussed flexible eating and tried to implement it somewhat unsuccessfully. So
Unsuccessfully.
I just wanted to hear his take on it. So I don't know exactly what he's going to say. He may say he hates it. He may say he loves it. He may say something completely irrational. So where should we start, Keith?
Well, first I want to say that I saw Jason's seminar last night. I've seen Jason speak on nutrition in the context of Level 1 seminar. I've seen what he's been doing on social media with flexible dieting and his coaching, and we'd even had a few interactions talking about it and him trying to get me on board with it. So I was excited to see the seminar, and it was great. I really liked it. There was a bunch of good questions, a bunch of good knowledge that he answered those questions with, and lots of good experience to draw from his coaching of many, many athletes through their diet goals and their nutrition goals. So it was wonderful, and it inspired me. I was like, damn it, I got to get that FitnessPal app back up and running and go check and recalculate my macros and get back on that program. So I'm gearing up for a Monday start again to
all good diets start on Monday.
Exactly. So I'm gearing up for a Monday start to get back on the program with calculating and tracking my macros as I go forward.
So can I ask you a quick question then? Based on that, you tend to be a more paleo guy.
Yes.
You know, and you eat pretty good quality all the time, and you eat more protein and fat, less carbs, which was the issue we were running into on flexible eating. So when you say you're starting Monday, why?
Well, great. Well, one of the things is one, I believe quality of food is extremely important. So especially now raising a child, I'm more conscious about what food we keep in the house and what food we feed ourselves, as well as little baby Jet.
Side note, I think it's funny to touch on what we've been discussing with the sugar addiction with Jet.
Yeah.
Because they keep, Jet's basically paleo from what I've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, he throws his food, but other than throwing the food...
That's how cavemen used to eat.
Exactly. What goes in is he has his routine. He takes a bite from mom, runs to dad, runs back to mom. But I don't want to say this in a negative light because you've done well, but it's like you can see sugar addiction because he eats fruit, and that's what his sugar is. So it's kind of cool to see that you can influence a baby at such a young age where a lot of people probably would have resorted to refined sugar. You're teaching them that dates or bananas are treats.
Yeah.
It's cool to see. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I would want to do with a child.
Yeah.
And guitar, like we talked about.
Yeah.
So when he's in college.
Yeah. So we had a little jam session this morning too. So Jet's gotten his protein. He ate some eggs and bacon this morning. He's had some dates, a little snack, and then jammed on the guitar, threw all his toys around.
Now he's sleeping.
It's a good morning. But what really sparked this conversation? Jason talks about his need for Pop-Tarts in his seminars, and you could see the visceral reaction of this one woman at the seminar where she was like aghast that Jason eats Pop-Tarts and calculates those into his macros, and Jason brought up some great points about how there is some food out there that you'd rather eat than broccoli, and pointed to different people, and they said chocolate and pizza and yeah, all this stuff they'd rather eat than broccoli. And this one woman was like, no. And she was like, I mean, perhaps that's true, but I'm sure if we really, you know, put her to the task, there would be something out there that she would prefer to eat or drink,
Right.
or you know, at given times over broccoli. And that, you know, sparked an interesting conversation because what you want to do, I think, in terms of your lifestyle and complying to a nutrition plan, not just for like 30 days, 60 days, but over the course of your lifetime, is understand that you're gonna eat some poor food choices once in a while. You're gonna have some cake, you're gonna have some ice cream, you're gonna eat some pizza or pasta or drink, you know, one or many drinks throughout the course of a day or a weekend. And you need to figure out how to put that into your lifestyle, into your nutrition plan to make it compliant so that you can eat well most of the time and then have your ability to go off the rails a little bit. And that was, you know, one of those places where, you know, people got a little...
Yeah, it was friendly.
It was friendly, yeah, it was good.
But I agree that woman, you know, there's a handful of people there, and I see this at every seminar where talking to people like, no, it has to be good quality. And I think a few things, and we discussed it again last night. For one, you know, what do they do for fun? And I don't equate food and fun, but but I suppose I do actually, you're right. I don't think you need to, but the point is, when you're having fun with friends and family, it's rare that there's just plates of broccoli sitting around. So you go to what do these two do when they go to a wedding? Are they miserable? Do they have a cheat day? Do they bring their own food? So there's that aspect. And both of us having owned numerous boxes over the years, I think you and I understand the average person needs that food. So my approach is sugar good for you? We talked about this last night. So sugar's not good for you, right? There's no arguing that.
Well, that was what sparked this conversation, because we were talking about, you know, the questions that came up and how to answer them, and that, you know, we were doing a little debrief. How did that go? And Jason was like, well, how do I, you know, answer that, reply to that when someone like claims like, you know, well, sugar's so bad for you. And I'm like, well, you don't argue that. I was like, sugar's bad for you. It's like that's not a winning argument.
You can't argue that.
You know, acknowledge that sugar's bad for you, but that you are going to have to eat it at some point in your life. It's almost impossible to avoid eating some sugar.
Right, and even if these two seem, I mean, in their defense, like, it seems like they truly do, and they were great people. I don't want, if they're watching, like, they were very nice people we spoke after, but my attitude, I'm really approaching flexible eating from a relationship and fixing your thought process and how you view food. So, is sugar good for you? No. But if eating some sugar allows you to sustain this diet for the long haul, keeps you mentally sane, allows you to go out and enjoy life with friends and family, is it good for you? Yes. Now, understanding we're viewing is it good for you two different ways. One, physiologically, or I suppose, is it physiologically, biologically, what it's doing inside versus emotionally and what it's doing to your psyche. So that's kind of where I was arguing sugar's not bad. Make sense? I mean, you and I spoke about it, so I know it makes sense. But I guess we still haven't answered the question. So when people are watching that eat good quality or paleo, etc., what's your reason for making that switch? In other words, you eat good, you eat healthy, as you would call it. Why change?
Oh yeah, well, eating healthy is one thing, and it's, you know, definitely, you know, if you make the conscious choice to start making better choices on your food quality, I think quality of life improves. My ability to, you know, cook more now is helping a lot with, you know, keeping things under control nutritionally. But as you get older, as being 45, and, you know, having a family, and I know having a family, it's like the ability to cook well and eat well is now, you know, in place, but there's also the propensity for like, I'm sitting around and I'm just gonna start grazing and eating a lot more than is good for my performance, good for my overall body composition. In order to meet my goals, I still have to put a regulator on the amount of food that I'm eating, because I can, prep a lot of food, have food around the house, be home with Jet, and kind of go to the kitchen continually and keep eating throughout the day, and not being able to have the energy to work out like I did like when I was in my 30s. Being 45 and a dad, I have limited time to work out, and so really nutrition is the best vehicle for me to maintain my body composition goals and to keep my health optimal with minimal amount of time spent in the gym under the barbell. So that is becoming more and more of an issue now that I have the quality dialed in fairly well. I need to spend a little more time just balancing out how much I'm eating throughout the day and not overfeed myself just mindlessly.
Speaking of Jet, he's crying up there.
Yeah.
Is he gonna be all right?
He's fine. He usually gets up for a quick cry and then he goes back down.
Right back to it. He's like me. So you're saying you eat good quality foods. Are you going to? So what you're suggesting is, and I agree with this, good quality foods in the right amount is really the best of the best. Eating, just like we talk about at CrossFit, but the analogy would be like not just doing functional movements, but doing them with high intensity, or making them measurable, observable, repeatable. So eating good quality foods in the right amount for you is what you would strive for.
Right.
So let's talk about this. You come from the paleo world. When you and I corresponded in the past and you were doing this, your fat would be very high, your protein would be pretty much on point, your carbs low, to the point where one time I had to ask you if you were eating straight butter. So where does that come in? Are you going to switch and try to eat more carbohydrates? And if so, why, and what's your feeling on that? People that come from a more ketogenic life or low carb life, what's your feelings on that?
Well, I mean, carbohydrates are necessary to greater or lesser degree, and it's your ability, I think, to tolerate them given your lifestyle, given your metabolism, and given all these things. And you need to find what the right dosage is. Like, carbohydrate in any form, whether it's like broccoli or Pop-Tarts, is going to break down to sugar. It's going to affect your insulin levels. It's going to affect your hormonal balance and your moods and your ability to store body fat or metabolize that body fat and use it for energy. And it's an individualized thing. And as I get older, the ability to store body fat is like I excel at that. I'm elite at storing body fat, and I'm not elite at metabolizing it as well and burning it off. So what I need to do is find the right amount of carbohydrates to fuel me, but not store as body fat. And that's really the goal here with measuring, is to sort of dial in how many grams a day of carbohydrates I can tolerate, and that's going to keep me, chugging along, but not like carry that extra spare tire around that I don't want to have. I don't want to have the dad bod moving forward.
But don't you think that could be said for any macronutrient?
Yeah.
Carbs get a bad reputation.
Yeah.
Like, you could be saying the same thing of, I need to figure out how much protein, because you can eat too much protein and store that as body fat.
Sure. Yeah, and for me, like the flip side of that is I probably eat too much fat as well, which is super dense calorically, because to keep my satiety up, because I'm not eating as many carbs, right? So there's I'm getting a lot more of my calories from fat, which ultimately is probably still storing as fat on my body. So what really it is it's not just the carbs, but it's balancing all those macronutrients and trying to dial in the right levels and right amounts to sort of optimize my body comp and my fitness goals. So, but that's usually the one that I struggle with the most. It's like, because for me, like, I can sit down at a plate of carbs and say, well, yeah, I only need to eat 1 cup of this, but somehow like 2 or 3 cups end up on my plate.
They're delicious.
Yeah, because they're delicious. So, and fat's a little bit the same way, but you can.
But you weren't getting, most people don't get their fat.
Despite what you think, I don't actually sit down and eat sticks of butter, so like I can regulate the fat a little bit easier.
Right, well, that's my point. Most, like, carbs are like, well, I'm eating either Pop-Tarts or cereal or white rice and sweet potatoes, where they're more dominant in carbohydrates. For fat, it's mostly people are just eating, especially in the paleo and CrossFit world, fattier meats.
Right.
Whether it's bacon or steak. You know, like you said, that one example of you had a prime rib and had your whole day of fat in that one prime rib.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do differently? So if someone out there is watching this and they say they want to give flexible eating a shot, but they're similar to you and more paleo, more meats and higher protein and fat, how are you going to do it differently this time?
Well, I'm just, knowing, some of the mistakes I made in the past, I know that eating more red meat, which I love, generally is also higher in fat, right? And something that we don't, coming from my weighing and measuring background is mostly zone, where we kind of treat, meat proteins as generally, all the same. About 1 ounce is about 7 grams, 1 block of protein. And we sort of calculate on average it has about 1.5 grams of fat, and then we do our fat calculation based off that. But when you actually look at the breakdown of, fat content in different types of meat, you realize, oh, well, the chickens, fish, and turkeys, the lean white meats are really lean, and the red meats are a lot more fatty. So being able to just start to push myself towards leaner cuts of meat most of the time, steering back towards chicken, fish, and turkey, and leaving the red meats for, treats, if you will, like, once in a while, as opposed to like, eating that every day, which was kind of what it started getting into. It's ordering the making ground beef or steaks or whatever, stews and stuff with a lot of red meat starts to up the fat content.
And I think you can have that type of meat almost daily, just
you have to account
once
for
a day. You can't have eggs and bacon for breakfast, a hamburger for lunch, and steak for dinner.
Right.
And that was a big change that I made. And I tell people I used to eat a lot of cashews, a lot of almonds, and I rarely eat that anymore because I get most of my fat through my meat sources these days.
Yeah.
So, what else do you think? So you're starting Monday. From someone, I just want to educate people that are either new to flexible eating or coming from that different mindset. What else are you going to do differently this time?
Well, 2 things. One, like we said, and this goes back to the thing where I think most paleo people make a similar mistake. It's where it's like, you go to a place and you're like, oh, well, I'll have the steak, that's clearly paleo, but it's like, a 20-ounce porterhouse or 24-ounce porterhouse, which is really like pretty much your whole daily requirement of protein in that one 24-ounce piece. And then, you get like, oh, I'll have the broccoli steamed on the side, but it's like usually, less than a zone block of
Like
broccoli.
5 grams of carbs.
Right,
from
5
broccoli.
grams of carbs, right? And then there's usually some like buttery whatever stuff. So you're getting a huge bolus of fat and protein at once with what looks like a healthy serving of vegetables, but it's really not as much vegetables to balance out the ridiculous amount of protein and fat you get in that one sitting. So one is just to be a little bit more conscious of, smaller portions in terms of the protein and fat, and like bigger portions in terms of the vegetables. And then also one of my biggest pitfalls in doing this before was because I came from a zone mentality and things are a lot simplified, much more simplified in the zone, where I'd look at like 4 or 5 ounces of meat and say, oh, that's about right. And I'd look at, this carb source and that carb source and put that in there, but not really taking into account the fact that the meat has that much fat in it, and the carb sources like a lot of like kale and stuff like that will kind of has some protein in it as well that carries over into your protein. And then so there was all the other macronutrients that actually exist in the foods that we kind of make a decision just to like look at foods as single macronutrient sources when we're zoning versus when you're calculating stuff, especially through the app. And now we have a little bit more data to say, oh yeah, this has this much grams of protein and fat and other stuff in it, that it really it messed with my mind in terms of I couldn't eyeball things and know exactly what I was getting. I had to really plan out and punch things in and look at the actual breakdown of proteins, fats, and carbs in each piece of food that I was gonna digest. So I thought I could go in and just kind of make decisions on the fly. It's like, oh, that's mostly protein, that's mostly carbs, that's mostly fat. And then when I punched it in after the meal, realized that my mentality, my thought of what the food was totally, not totally off, but wasn't the 100% full view of what I was ingesting. And so the numbers that I would get when I punched in the food I ate after I ate it was way off.
Well, and obviously I recommend to always plug your food in first, but if
Right.
you're on the fly and you're just eating, and I think people ask what's the big difference between flexible eating and the zone is just that. The zone classifies every food as one macronutrient, like bacon is protein in the zone.
Right.
But there's still a significant amount of fat. Or, avocado is fat, but there's a lot of carbs in it. So where this, like you said, it's hard to eyeball what it is and then figure out all three macronutrients.
Yeah.
I always talk about this with paleo. Tell me if, this is just my hypothesis, tell me if you agree or disagree. I said it last night. As CrossFitters, we've kind of taken our own spin on paleo and taken it to mean bacon. Paleo is bacon, or, and realistically, it's like you said, just meat. In the Paleolithic era with cavemen, they probably had easier access to fruits and vegetables than they did bacon or meat. So why has paleo become this idea of high protein and fat, low carbs? So like I said, my hypothesis is because we've just enjoyed meat more than we do vegetables. They taste better. They're, we could take them on the road with us. We can go to a restaurant and get them, or like you said, you order a steak and you get this tiny amount of broccoli. But is paleo low carb, or is that just what, as CrossFitters and the world, we've defined it as?
Right.
What do you agree, disagree? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing with every time you sort of like talk about like a diet and just sort of generalize, and people left to their own devices, yeah, we're going to start to gravitate towards, like going to extremes. People tend to go to extremes. So you hear paleo and it turns into sort of just like a high protein, high fat, low carb diet, and we just, get rid of all the carbs. And that's, yeah, like you said, it's probably not how the cavemen really ate. They probably didn't eat huge amounts of steaks
Bacon every day.
and bacon every day, and then like just a little side dish of broccoli, right? So what we need to do, and this is just going back to why keeping track of how much you're eating is so important, is like you can start to actually balance the amount of carbs, proteins, and fats throughout the day, and see like how much you're actually eating, and like at a certain point you're going to eat more protein than your body can really do anything with, and then you're either going to store it as fat or eject it and not digest it, and same with fat, same with carbs. So really just learning to keep better track of this stuff and will help a lot in terms of not overeating too much foods, and not being able to do anything with it other than store it. And the other side to this too is, and one thing I really liked when I was zoning is that it would force me to eat a certain amount of food, but generally speaking, I like many people who kind of gravitate towards a paleo lifestyle tend to overeat like meats and fats, and those tend to be actually really expensive.
That's true.
Right? And when you start actually like measuring the amount of food you're eating, it's like I said, it's like you order a 24-ounce steak and you sit there and finish it in one seating.
That's 4 or 5 meals, really.
Yeah, that's actually like several meals throughout the day. If you ate like one 5-ounce portion or so and put the rest in a doggy bag, you'd have like a couple meals left over, right? So when you start prepping and measuring out your food, you realize, you stretch your food a lot further, right? And then you realize like, I have to make up some more carbs, and then you go out and hopefully put some vegetables in there and maybe some denser carbs like potatoes or rice or something that you can fill it out with, and it starts becoming a little bit more economical too when you're not.
That's a good point.
When you're not drowning in like grass-fed butter all the time and like coconut oil, it's like
So I talk a lot about people are under eating, and that's why they're not losing weight.
Right.
I want you to get scientific for a moment, and not too sciencey. people that watch this aren't that smart. So don't get too sciencey. But how would you convince someone that they need to actually eat more to lose weight?
Yeah, I mean, you have the psychology degree. I don't. I don't know how to convince people to do anything.
But explain it from a scientific background, because I can do it, like you said, from a connection and psychology standpoint. But then people like last night, they're like, no way, I need to eat more. And I'm like, you're not eating enough. You know, other than telling them I've seen it hundreds of times,
Right.
how would you explain it to them? You know, this is kind of what we talked about a little bit yesterday.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure of the science on that. Like, I mean, metabolic science is still hotly debated, you know, and there's lots of different theories on why this stuff happens. There's that, thrifty gene sort of theory that if you undereat, your body wants to store more energy because, you don't know when that next meal is coming. You feel like you're being starved, and that makes sense to some degree. And giving your body more food, stimulates your metabolism to start working harder and start, burning more calories. And I think also it obviously more food is more energy, and once your body has more energy, it often feels compelled to start using that, right? When you go out there and you can work out a little harder, you go for longer walks, you just have, you're not, hopefully not as sedentary. But I think it's mostly based on that, and also I think it's not just the amount of food, but when you start putting in more of the right foods and the right macronutrients, that if you're under eating protein, your body's not building muscle. It's not able to work as well. And muscle is a building block. So if you have protein to build with, your body will hopefully regenerate and build more, replenish your cells. Fat is again a big energy source for the body. All this metabolic processes are lubricated with fat and need fat to move things along. And carbohydrates are a good energy source too. Again, and when you balance these out, I think it has a better hormonal effect, which allows you to just be in a better state, and that stimulates the metabolism and allows you to go forward.
Another thing, you touched on a good point that we were talking about, in that most people, if they are eating enough, they're just not eating it via the right macronutrient breakdown.
Right.
And most people, CrossFitters are very unique, but the average person out there is maybe getting the right amount of calories, but primarily from carbs.
Right.
Where when they shift some of those carbs to protein, they're building muscle, and they're also going to feel satisfied longer, so maybe they will not feel that need to dive into more carbohydrates. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean the psychology of it is once you start eating carbohydrates and more simple carbohydrates, they have that addictive effect, right? You've seen it in lab mice, and there's all the studies that show that
Southern Jet.
That sugar is more addictive than cocaine, right? And
well, he was doing cocaine too, for the record.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But so yeah, when you compile that, when you start to layer on more sugar, more carbohydrate, right? The drive is there to just eat more carbohydrates, and then there's that lethargy that ensues from like addiction, right? Where you're just looking to get your next fix, and then everything else starts to fall by the wayside. I mean, you see this, go watch like Trainspotting, go watch like a movie about addiction where you see like the whole drive becomes to get to more of that stuff that you fiend for.
And even as someone that keeps track, I feel it. My addiction isn't necessarily that I need carbs, but when I eat something, at the end of eating something healthy, my mind goes, okay, now what is sweet?
Yeah.
And I break that personally because I know what I need to eat today, but you can definitely see that.
Yeah.
But to me, that's also why, in the past, I might give into that, not keeping track of how much food I need. Where now, if I do give into it, it's in a very specific amount. I get one Twizzler if I'm having something that I need it that way. Or even like yesterday, a banana. which might satisfy my sweet tooth, but I know how much of it I'm eating. So I guess the point is that we're trying to make is we're not going to argue that quality isn't important. I always tell people broccoli's healthier than donuts. But if having some of these less favorable foods keep you on point, make your diet sustainable, allow you to do it for the long haul, what's truly healthier?
Right. Yeah.
Do you think you'll be successful this time?
More so than last time. Yeah.
Last time was an epic failure.
Yeah.
How will you define that?
I mean, hopefully I'll lose some weight and get back down under 200 pounds.
What do you currently weigh?
I didn't weigh myself this morning. Probably about 210, 205, 210.
And what would your goal be by eating this way?
190.
So 15, 20 pound weight loss.
Yeah.
You're not going to make a whole lot of changes to the types of foods you eat. You're simply going to put parameters on it, and you're going to have a paradigm shift between fats and carbs.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is like I've noticed in the last couple months since moved into the new house and been home more, and I've been prepping a lot more of my meals, doing a lot more cooking and food prep. So, I have starting to get a system in place where I'm prepping a lot of meals, putting them in the fridge and the freezer, so there's lots of ready-made meals to pull out and eat. Now it's just a matter of weighing and measuring them and getting them into proportion, so I know when I pull out a meal, it's pretty dialed in terms of protein, carbs, and fat. And if I eat 4 meals a day or something right from my own fridge, like I'll be dialed in.
Right. When you did this last time, I don't remember if it was when you were in between houses or still in Brooklyn, but it was a little more complex. Where now, certainly eating this way, it's easier, and you can have more accuracy when eating at home. When you're preparing your own meals, going out to eat, you're not sure exactly what's in it.
Right.
So do you plan on, for someone that plans on prepping, because I always tell people, you need to plan, you don't need to prep. Or if you are prepping, are you going to label your Tupperware with, this has 40 carbs, 30 protein, 30 fat, or are you going to just make something and then measure it after? How are you going to set yourself up for success, and what would you recommend to the people watching?
Yeah, well, one, I recommend going to Amazon or a restaurant supply store and getting the little, plastic containers with the lids that have like 2 compartments on them. 2, cook in big batches, and try to cook stuff that's, what do you call, like macronutrient prominent, or what'd you say?
Macro dominant. So you're
Yeah.
so that way it's easier to determine what's in it.
Yeah,
I see what
exactly.
you're. So rather than make a stew with everything,
Yeah,
you're suggesting make your meat,
yeah,
make your
exactly.
vegetables. Gotcha.
So throw the chicken in the slow cooker, shred the chicken up, right? Have some, broccoli, sweet potatoes, stuff like that. Put it in the compartment. I can measure out the meat, put it in, measure out the, sweet potatoes, the broccoli, put it in there, and then it's really easy to, weigh as it goes in. And then if I'm assembly lining 10 meals, it gets really easy to do each one. It gets quicker and quicker as you move along, because.
That's a good point though, because I get a lot of people that say, well, I make this recipe or that recipe, how do I account for everything? Well, you can make your chicken, like you said, shred it, and you can still mix it with vegetables after.
Right.
But because you've prepared them separately, it's easier to track them individually, and then you have it within the app.
So like, my kitchen is more and more getting set up so that I have the, the slow cooker, the oven, all the pots and pans. I have
Two coffee machines,
and the label maker, and then, assembly line, a bunch of meals.
a label maker, really?
Yeah, there's a label maker.
So you can put on
I
what's
think
in
Jet threw it somewhere, but it's around.
He probably did.
Yeah.
But that's a good idea too. Even just writing it on there, like you said, labeling it, or knowing that every one of these Tupperwares is X in it, so you're set up for success.
Yeah.
I like that. I think, because like I say in the seminar, don't let this be an excuse to eat crappy, which I've done in the past. You still want to eat good quality foods. You still want to prepare it at home. It's easy to go out and buy frozen pizzas and Snickers bars and those types of things and just scan it and eat it. Where we still want to be smart about our nutrition.
Yeah.
Cool. Any last minute or last words of wisdom regarding nutrition, flexible eating, anything, fatherhood?
No, just have fun. I mean, live your life. Try to eat well. Eat to eat to have a good life. Eat to be healthy and have fun and enjoy yourself. Don't shy away from a donut every now and then.
Daily.
I mean, if you have the access to daily really good donuts, you might have to move. Luckily, there's no awesome donut shops within like a 10-mile radius of me.
Is that why you moved to out of Brooklyn to come here?
Yeah, exactly.
Too
much good, delicious hipster food in Brooklyn. That was way too easy to.
Now you're in suburbia.
Yeah.
This is great. Well, thanks, Keith. I appreciate your knowledge bombs.
Thank
Keith
you.
Wittenstein, Coach Panda.
Jason Ackerman, Baby Jesus.